I just wanted to click through and show for those, Robert did a great job of covering this model. There are kind of various different places that you can get this information. The first is the Treefruit extension website, where you can just treefruit.wsu.edu. And if you kind of navigate to Pear IPM and the phenology model, as this is probably the most detailed version of the recommendations that exists on the web. If you click on any of these intervals, it gives a fairly comprehensive description of what may be going on in terms of the conditions, what are some of the applicable treatments. As Robert said, around 200 degree days, you may be considering a particle film application or moving into insect growth regulators or some of the other chemistries. Some of both conventional and organic management guidelines. Then we'll jump to the popcorn stage. So these recommendations are very general and can be used for, are not telling you anything about the specific degree days in your locations, but are kind of giving you these broad categories of where the recommendations may be found. If you haven't done so, you should also try to subscribe to the weekly newsletter that Robert mentioned. Molly, his graduate student, along with Robert, have been sending these out for the last few weeks. They typically have information about what's going on with the models. It will have this degree day table that shows locations where we're tracking Pear Psylla and providing information. It also will have future data as they start scouting more and more. You will start to be able to see from the different areas where they're scouting, where Pear Psylla populations, what they are doing. And again, it will have links to go back to that Treefruit site. So those are a couple of locations where, here's the scouting page again within the Treefruit site. So moving forward to the decision aid system, I think a lot of you, if you're not familiar with the decision aid system, the URL is just decisionaid.systems. This is the Treefruit site. For those that know, we have some information publicly available. This is also a subscription-based system where you subscribe to weather stations that have a variety of different models. But if you come to the decision aid system page and click on Pear Psylla, this is one of the public pages that will have this map. And based on some of our attendees, maybe we should add a site over in Green Bluff, north of Spokane, but showing from Omak and then kind of the Wenatchee Valley into Yakima and then down into some of the Oregon production regions. You can see on the public page, again, just what the degree days are at the current moment without really any other context than that. So, if you looked at this page, you would then need to also be familiar with Robert and team's recommendations, so you could relate what these degree days are showing to what you should be doing regarding Pear Psylla. Now I will show the decision aid system itself and walk through how we've kind of adapted Robert's phenology model and recommendations into the decision aid system framework. So if you're not familiar with the decision aid system, which I think probably most of you are, the first thing you do when you come into our system is kind of pick your weather stations. And this is the network of weather stations that we are currently pulling in data from in Washington through the AgWeatherNet as well as the AgriMet network. If you happen to be a grower down into Oregon, we have pulled in a variety of other sites down into Oregon, which were not available in the past. And not that it's applicable for this particular insect very much, but we have a lot of sites down in Idaho as well. If there's no weather station near your location, let's say you were right here, you can actually put a pin on the map as well and add what we call a virtual weather station that's pulling in gridded weather data, kind of think the data that you might get on your phone, but on steroids. And these data are also very suitable for running the Pear Psylla model, which only needs temperature as an input. I would like to just point out, since this is a new model, if you're like a recurring DAS subscriber, you'd want to make sure that when you set up your stations that the Pear Psylla model is actually clicked, because we kind of store your preferences from previous years. So if this was not a model that you looked at in the past, but you are a DAS user, you'll just want to make sure that you've set it up on your various different stations. So I wanted to show a few, take an opportunity to walk through this model, what it actually looks like on the decision aid system, how some of the work of Robert and team have been kind of transitioned into the decision aid system format. So I would say the key difference between the decision aid system and what's available on the tree fruit page are really the site-specific predictions of what are the degree days at your particular location or the set of stations that you're subscribed to, as well as the future forecasts of what may happen. And I'll also show the tools that we have to kind of assess the historical situation with Pear Psylla, which many of you that are here may not be aware of because it's a new feature that we launched this year. So if I were subscribed to the Kashmir station, and again, please stop me if anyone has questions, or Liesl, if anything pops in the chat, I can't see it, so make sure to interrupt me. But we have at the top the overview of the Pear Psylla model. That kind of indicates, again, this is replicated from the tree fruit page, kind of those phenological curves for the adults, nymphs, and hard shells, as well as some of the suggested spray timings, as well as Robert mentioned, some of the intervals where you may be doing mating disruption for codling moth, or where you have some of these non-insecticidal based strategies like pruning or washing to control Pear Psylla. So kind of unlike the tree fruit page, if you were in the DAS system, it will actually spit out the conditions with a prediction of kind of where are your population actually at and what's going to happen in the future. So I'm looking at Kashmir. So today in Kashmir, we're at 208 degree days, which is just past the predicted peak of winter form adults. So you might see, if you were logged onto the Kashmir station today, that, winter form adult numbers should begin to decline, and that, they've gone down by about 6% from their peak abundance. Again, this is a model. It's not going to be perfect. If you're using scouting or monitoring data to try to compare with this model, there are some problems with doing that, especially if your trapping density or monitoring is pretty rare. Again, we'll have, depending on which stages are present in the field, as Robert mentioned, a lot of you don't want to apply, anything that would only kill eggs, for example, at a time when there are no eggs, or, nymphs. There are no nymphs in the situation at the moment right now. We're just really having winter form adults. So these are what you would see, along with a chart that kind of shows both kind of where we are at within the season and where we're projected to go into the future. And then it will be linked directly with these conventional and organic management options. If you want more information, you can see down here in the data table, we are running that model and, making a prediction of how these populations are going to change, both the adults, nymphs, hard shells, and all these other stages up to 40 days into the future. So we can kind of see, this Pear Psylla population in Kashmir is close to its peak. will maybe keep growing a little bit over the next 10 to 15 days when we expect it to kind of reach its peak density, and then it will start declining again. And as you can kind of see, if you look at the blue line up here, it only takes about 250 degree days or so for the Pear Psylla winter forms to reach their peak. But then it takes another kind of 750 degree days for all of those winter form adults to go away. So you should see in your orchard kind of a rapid colonization in many cases, where those populations are increasing fairly quickly, and then kind of a slow tapering off as those winter forms die out. Whereas with these other curves, you can see they're a little bit more normally distributed. There are typical bell curves where, once these adults lay eggs around the peak, we kind of have a reliable curve for the nymphs, hard shells. And then the summer form adults, again, seem to be a little bit more normally distributed on the degree day scale than the winter forms. And you can see the summer forms are active for quite a bit of time on the degree day model. I showed here that, and this has always been a tool of DAS, the ability to kind of look into the future and, say, hey, what might happen on April 30th? But what is a new feature of DAS that maybe none of you have seen before is this feature called Time Machine that we have released this year to everyone who's a DAS subscriber. So if I were to use Time Machine, I might want to even go back to last year, or, we have data all the way back to 2019 that you could go and look at. Maybe, you were looking at your records of when you made different sprays for Pear Psylla, and you want to look back and see how that matched up with what was going on with the phenology model. And so using this Time Machine feature, I could set the internal clock on my computer to say June 9th, 2022. And now what's showing to me is the prediction from last year on June 9th, that we were at 1,070 degree days. Here's what should have been going on at that time. Again, the management options. And just like if we had this clock set to today, it kind of would allow you to go back or forward in time and see how some of those predictions had changed. This is also a tool that could be used just to kind of compare where you are at in 1 year versus the previous year. And we're thinking about various ways that we might be able to display these data. I know one of the things that's really important, and one of the things that jumps out at people is kind of, where am I at this year versus last year on the same date? And so, as Robert said, they're 2 to 3 weeks behind. If I were to look at cashmere on April 11th last year, we would have already been at 350 degree days. Whereas, we're only at 200 degree days right now. So we are about, at this particular station, 150 degree days behind where we were at the same time last year. And, that's about a 2 to 3 week shifts. And so Robert did a good job of explaining this, but really, if you are still learning about the idea of a phenology model, I think one of the basic fundamental understandings is just things don't happen on the same calendar date every year. They really happen at the same time based on these heat units. And so, whatever you were doing at April 15th last year, or sorry, April 11th last year, I'm gonna go back to the present here, just by I can clear out this date and it will take me back to the present. But give me a second to pull this up. So if we were to come down and look at when are we predicted to hit 350 degree days this year in Kashmir, it's not till May 2nd. So, whatever you were doing on April 11th last year is probably what you need to be doing around the start of May this year. And so hopefully this is a nice tool that you all can use to get some historical context, especially in a year like this year that has been one of the coldest that I can remember. Just a couple other things, and then we'll kind of cut it and see if there's any questions. Another new tool on the decision aid system this year are alerts. You can also see we have alerts for other insects, but such as codling moth, fire blight, leaf roller, western cherry fruit fly. We encourage you to look at what these are. But related to Pear Psylla, some of the alerts that you could set up are related to maybe that first particle film application if you need it at around 75 degree days, or when things start kicking off in the model, a period of kind of peak adult intensity, 2 weeks after that peak intensity, or really when the summer form adults become active. So if you were to set an alert, let's say I wanted to do that at cashmere, I would click on Pear Psylla peak adults, and you can enter a phone number in our system. You don't have to. You could just get alerts by email, but if you enter a phone number, you can also get alerts by phone. I would click this right here, and now it'd be set up. And when cashmere is within 7 days of the predicted peak adults, now I would get a text message and an email that just tells me, hey, in 7 days, we expect this key threshold to be reached, maybe go into the decision aid system and check the model. Let's see, I showed this. The last tool that I'll show, and we will be kind of producing these. This is not a feature of DAS right now, but we are very interested in the future if we can figure out the funding of DAS to move beyond the subscription-based system to a system where we're able to give out all of the information that we have to everyone. We've never really been able to figure out the sustainable funding model for that, which is why even preceding my time, the subscription model was put in place. But this is what maybe a future DAS might look like, where if I were to come in as a user, it's actually all of the small dots on here are every single weather station that we're pulling in data from Washington. The larger circles are the stations that I'm actually subscribed to. So we're trying to go towards more of a format where people could be able to see all of the data that we have. And, very quickly, you might be able to scroll through and see that, weather stations in Southern Washington are around the 300-400 degree day range, up in I would like to highlight kind of how unique the Wenatchee Valley from kind of Wenatchee to Kashmir is, because along some of these elevational gradients, you can see, the Malaga station just south of Rock Island's at 207 degree days. But as you kind of move up the hill here, the Stimmelt station's at 79. And so, whereas Leavenworth's only at 138 degree days, Kashmir is 70 degree days ahead. So we may in the future produce kind of a heat map that shows what those degree days might look like across the entire state. But this is, again, a tool that we are going to release to a selective number of users to kind of beta test it this year. And you can see it's also available for our other insects like codling moth. If you are interested in being one of the beta users for DAS, if you're a regular DAS user and would like to test out some of these new features and would be willing to provide our team with feedback, this is one of the new features that we're letting kind of select users use this year, where, again, more like a weather forecast, you could see everything that's going on at all the stations and have a different, here using this slider bar, I can kind of scroll through and see, all the way up to April 25th, how the predictions of the model might change. And then, if I click on any of these stations, it will take me directly to that station and the model for that station. And so This is just another way that we're trying to adapt DAS to give out more of the information that we have. Another kind of example of that is just on the homepage, really, as Robert showed, where we showed the degree days for 7 different stations. But these are some of the tools that you can use to kind of implement the Pear Psylla model within the decision aid system, and then hopefully the time machine feature, as well as the alerts, maybe a way that you can, get forecasts, directly to your phone without having to kind of constantly be going to DAS, or kind of go back and review some of your historical management and how those timings changed from year to year. So with that, I think I've covered all of the features we have on DAS at the moment.